Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Thursday, February 24th, 2022. One of the true joys of doing analyst work is coming across new startup companies that have the potential of disrupting legacy markets. Joining me for today's podcast is two senior execs from Ember, a new company whose mission is disrupting and expanding the vacation home market by making it more accessible and mainstream. Please welcome Kurt Avarell, Ember CEO, and Jeff Lyman, the company's Chief Executive Officer, to the podcast. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Mark.
Great to be here.
No, I appreciate your coming on the podcast, because when I was briefed on this a couple of days ago, my initial reaction was this is going to be something really, really hot, and so you guys are going to be riding a Bronco, so to speak, when the news about this gets out there. What I typically like to do, though, before we get into the meat of the questions, I like to really kind of ask each of you guys, talk about a little bit your backgrounds, the pedigree of the company, because it has a very impressive investor pedigree, which does make a big difference when new startups announce their intention to come to market. So with that, let me bring up a slide here that will kind of show. There we go. We'll start with you, Kurt. Let's talk about your background. You're the big guy there, CEO, but let's talk about your background and your view of the company.
Yeah, so my formal training is actually as an attorney. So I started in Manhattan in New York City more than 10 years ago at a large white shoe law firm called Milbank Tweed. A super interesting time to be on Wall Street during the 2008 crisis, and but had a great experience there. But ended up leaving to go kind of pursue my dream of getting into tech and being an entrepreneur. And so I've been in tech for about, just a little over 10 years. The last company that I started is a company called Canopy, which focuses on automation for accountants. That company's been very successul, and I'm now, working with my co-founders and the rest of the team at Ember to bring kind of the next generation of vacation home ownership to the United States and then across the world.
Jeff, let's talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm a West Coast kid from Portland, Oregon. My background is all in digital and consumer experience and lifestyle brands. I was 10 years at Nike, doing things like building fitness apps and, custom shoe builders and e-commerce products all over the world. And then I spent 7 years at Vivint Smart Home, which is the second largest residential security and smart home provider, both as at different points of chief marketing officer and chief product officer, building connected locks, lights, cameras, thermostats, etc. Always passionate about the home, always passionate about technology and how it can unlock the home experience. And so excited to now apply that in this really fascinating second home, vacation home ownership space.
Now, you both went to Brigham Young. Did you know each other at school?
I would have never talked to Kurt. No, he was on the law school, part of the campus. We didn't ever interact. I think we went at different times, and I went to grad school at the University of Oregon, home of the Mighty Ducks. So I have some split loyalties between the Duck and the Cougar, but we make it work.
Well, I won't invoke what Shakespeare said about lawyers, because I don't want to hurt Kurt's feelings. But actually, I'm sure that legal background actually comes in very handy, the way you've kind of constructed Ember and some of the things we talked about the other day during my initial briefing. But before we get to the heart of the questions, one of the big, it's in your press release, one of the big things that just stood out for me is that Ember has got a strong association with Peter Thiel, who's obviously got a larger-than-life reputation in the tech space. Again, I don't want you to speak for him per se, but if he was on the podcast right now, what kind of initiated his interest in Ember and why he wanted to get involved with it from a backing standpoint?
Yeah, I think so, Peter. If you look at kind of through his investment thesis over the past 20 plus years, like he has an uncanny eye for industries and asset classes and new verticals that are emerging that end up becoming mainstream. And you can see that in digital payments, from PayPal to short-term stays in Airbnb and others. And so I think when he saw Ember, and again, not, I obviously can't speak for him either, but I think, the investment thesis is strong, which is, we've shown in a very short period of time that there's strong product market fit, that families and individuals are buying Ember homes. And it just makes a lot more sense than the alternative, which is to buy, an entire vacation home, or, staying at Airbnbs in the same location where you're going multiple times a year. So the thesis, I think, shared across the entire investor group is that this is the way people will own vacation homes and buy and sell vacation homes 5-10 years from now. And we're just at the very beginning of that, and the cusp of that kind of next generation of vacation home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's an incredible concept. We'll get into the nitty gritty right now. In fact, why don't we go right into that, guys? Is that, I guess the first topic is, why hasn't the vacation home ownership market not gone mainstream? And I'm not talking about casual condos, but, in very well-to-do areas, a lot of folks, obviously affordability is always a big deal. I'm sure that will be one of the reasons. But, from your conceptual standpoint, when you guys were constructing this overall approach to the market, what are some of the things that jumped out at you? Let me start with Jeff on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been about the match of the available time that folks have to actually spend in a second home, matching up with the investment that they want to make in the second home. And heretofore, those have been incongruent. You may only have 5 or 6 weeks a year, but I don't want to own this thing outright and have it, gather dust for the other 45 or 46 weeks out of the year and worry about a second home and property taxes and payment and, homeowners insurance and what happens if a pipe breaks and that whole thing. And so, and yet, if it's only something you're going to go and enjoy maybe 5 or 6 weeks out of the year, that just didn't seem to sort of be able to line up. And so the major unlock here, the sort of hack that you're sort of seeing here, this sort of cheat code, is that now we can finally align usage of the actual home with ownership of the home. So if I'm only going to be there 5 or 6 weeks out of the year, I want to be there 11 or 12 weeks out of the year, I can own 1/8 of the home, or I can own 2/8 of that home. And then that way I'm sort of taking on the burden of 1/8 of the property taxes and 1/8 of the property management, and that whole piece. It's like it's a pretty tremendous unlock. And there really was not really up until very recently any services that were making that turnkey for that everyday user. It's really tough to go, okay, now I got to go find 7 friends who want to do this with me, and who's going to write the operating agreement, and now we got to create an LLC, and now I got to go find a property manager. Now who's going to furnish it? Oh no, these house cleaners aren't good. I need to find better ones. It's like all that stuff. Your second home can become a second job. And I think the thesis here and the unlock is like, no, let's make it so it's turnkey for them entirely, but so they can have all of the benefits of ownership to the extent that either they can afford it or have time availability to do it, mixed with the convenience of nightly rentals. So it's clean when they're there. They don't worry about it when they're not. And this is where kind of those two Venn diagrams overlap and create something that's really, I think, pretty special.
Well, and the other question I have here, and I think this was the epiphany when we had our call the other day, while, vacation home ownership is, a dream that many, many families have, the reality is that when someone buys a second home, if they can afford it, a vacation home, they generally don't stay there, 5, 6, 7 months. They're only staying there a portion of the time. And there's all, you listed in very good detail the kind of the burdens that are associated with that. So let's talk a little bit about that, some of the data that you guys been able to unravel in terms of, the fact of the matter is, even if you own 100% of a home, if you're only there X number of days, that time that you're not there, it's kind of wasted expense, frankly, in terms of financing the home if you're owning 100% of it. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 1 out of every 10 homes in the U.S. is a second home. And on average, it's occupied only eight weeks a year. So you've got, 10 million homes, with 44 weeks each of just emptiness, gathering dust. So you add that up, it's 440 million weeks of vacant second homes across the US today. And so whenever you have strong demand for something and then lots of supply, what great businesses do is figure out a way for the demand to meet the supply and the supply to meet the demand. And that's where you get a service like Ember. And so, one of the pieces that really drives that as well is, look, in the post-COVID world, which we are gratefully beginning to emerge out of, there are things, some nuances that we're never going to go back to. And that is that remote work at some level is here to stay. And so now when folks think about, okay, I might own a second home, well, maybe in the year 2017 or 2018, they think, well, I get 3 weeks of PTO a year and I never use it. But now in this sort of post-COVID world where remote work has really been the standard, they're thinking, okay, yes, it's a vacation home and I will use it to relax and enjoy and it's, recharge, etc. But also I expect for a good period while I'm there to be able to enjoy the climate, amenities, etc. But also that I'm going to need to work. So I'm going to need an office space and I want a 1 gig internet, etc. And if I can work there and vacation there in a destination place I love to be, okay, now I can see it makes sense. I would be there 6 weeks a year or 12 weeks a year. And so we then allow them to sort of buy the amount of the home that they would, sort of plan on using throughout the year. And that's really kind of one of the tremendous unlocks.
Kurt, anything else to add to that? I think you're on mute, Kurt.
Apologies. So I think that covers it. I mean, I think the big value proposition here is, we're making something available that wasn't previously available. And by doing that, there's a tremendous amount of value in the unbundling of a whole home vacation home to 8 different owners. Because when was the last time you could get ownership in a $2 or $3 million home for $250,000 to $300,000? It didn't ever really exist. And so that's the, a big part of what Ember brings to the market.
Let's tee up the next topic here. So let's go right to it. The value proposition of Ember. I mean, clearly this expands the market from my perspective in a pretty dramatic way. It gets a customer who would never have been able to dream of being able to finance access to a vacation home, and lowers that bar dramatically. We talked about some of the consequences or the implications as this kind of business model is rolled out. But let me start with you, Kurt. If you had to succinctly say, here's what the value proposition of Ember is, how would you kind of succinctly describe it?
Yeah, I think I would say it's making something available that wasn't previously available, that most everybody wants. Creating that vacation home ownership experience that, we're in this country, especially, we dream of home ownership. It's the American dream. It's what, we're taught from when we're young. And that dream quickly, once you own your first home, or maybe even before you own your first home, moves from your primary residence to your secondary. How many times do we find ourselves at night, Zillow surfing, looking at opportunities or homes and markets where we want to be? Like, oh, wouldn't that be amazing to have a vacation home destination or a vacation home in that location? And then you start to get into it, and it's like, oh, that home is really expensive, or it's expensive, and I can afford it, but I just won't use it enough to justify it, but I really do want it. And so you end up with these, roadblocks that Ember breaks down, and we'll take the home that you want in the area that you want, and make it affordable. And you can buy anywhere from 1 to 4 shares in that home, so you can have as much time in that home as you want. That's right for your lifestyle. And then we abstract all of the stuff that goes into home buying that none of us like documents, pages of documents and escrows and title. And you won't see any of it. It's super simple. You're basically buying a membership interest in an LLC when you buy with Ember. And it's the same side on the same experience on the flip side of that when you go to sell. So that simplicity, that unlock of an asset class that didn't previously exist, and then that experience of owning without having to manage, that's like the real value prop in what Ember brings to the market.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, there's a turnkey flavor to this that's very attractive. And that's the word I think is the appropriate word to use. But let's, before we move on to the next topic, let's talk about that turnkey, attribute that's so interesting about this.
Yeah, it turnkey and consistently turnkey. And I think that's we've all had that kind of nightly rental experience where, like, the way the photos were taken and the description, and then you show up and you're like, wait a minute, what lens did they use to make this 400 square foot place look much bigger than that? And we've all kind of been bitten by maybe what we, vacation time is hard earned, and we want it deployed well, and we don't want to be sweating and having problems. And so when we book something and we get to it and it's not what we expect it to be, that's like really frustrating. And usually there's fee structures that are super high, and you're paying all these like local vacation taxes and all these things. So one of the things that our owners are coming to us for is like, we want a place that is not just turnkey for us that we don't have to worry about, but every time we come down, we can depend on the experience that we're going to have. It's consistent. We know all the rooms. We know how they're appointed. We know, they're assigning who's going to sleep where, who will sleep where on their way down. They can drive to it at, on a last minute basis. And that, it really is kind of that sort of family cabin experience. They're buying into this knowing, okay, we're going to be here 5-6 times a year for multiple years. And that's actually where the name Ember comes from. If you think about kind of sort of the lasting radiance and warmth that comes from that ember in the fire, we think about the memories that these homes are really the backdrop for over kind of generations of time. And so they're building something that they want to be like a family heirloom that is really that stage for so many of these life experiences. And so we've got to make sure that we deliver a consistently turnkey and wonderful experience every single time. And that's part of kind of with our model why we don't outsource a lot. We do the property management ourselves because we want to make sure it's done really well. We like hand pick and vet each of our vendors, whether it's the pest control person or the pool maintenance person or whatever it is, just to make sure that the quality of the service that we offer, not just when the home is turned over and sold on the first day, but for generations to come, continues to be a really exquisite experience.
Right. So, we've touched on a number of these subjects, but let's drill down specifically on some of the advantages of co-ownership, because for some people this is a new concept. Again, we talked about after I was briefed the other day with both of you. There's time sharing kind of pops up into people's minds. We'll talk about that specifically in a second, because that really confuses. That really is not a distraction so much as, but you're not fundamentally understanding what Ember is accomplishing. It's not a timeshare type of thing, in a classic sense. But from your perspective, what are the 2 or 3 big advantages? Let me start with Kurt, that the people can wrap their hands around from your perspective, Kurt.
Yeah, I think specifically as it relates to the Ember co-ownership model, one of the biggest advantages is just the simplicity and peace of mind that comes from it. People are buying this home for a vacation. That's what they're going for. They're going to have experiences. And where do we have most of our memorable experiences? It's with friends, it's with family, and it's often in our homes. And so what the co-ownership model does, and specifically the Ember co-ownership model, is we abstract all the pain that kind of can come along with that, the challenges of that ownership and the headache, so that the only thing that the owner has to think about is when they're going, and who they're taking, and what they're going to do while they're there for fun. They don't have to think about any of the other things that come along with home ownership. We take care of all that for them. And like Jeff said, we just make that experience very predictable.
And Jeff, the remarkable thing is, and we talked about this the other day, is that your the 1/8 share in these co-ownership models, they will appreciate in value. They don't stay static. They don't stay flat. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's really very nice. That falls into the investment category.
Yeah, and like all things someone might invest in, it's subject to as the market floats things up and down.
Of course.
I think one of the benefits is like this becomes a an asset that can be bought and sold actually through our own marketplace. So if you buy in at a share in the year 2022 and you decide after 5 years that you want to upgrade or downgrade or liquidate it, if the market gains that appreciation, you can turn around and then sell that share. And we're a licensed brokerage in the markets that we operate in, and so we're able to list it on their behalf. And as real estate floats up, they're actually able to capture those gains, which is so, and we can talk about this later, so atypical when you think about a timeshare where you're lucky to even be able to sell it, but even if you do, being able to sort of capture gains in that process is sort of darn near impossible.
No, we're going to get into the timeshare thing in a second. But go ahead.
The other thing that I would add, and I really like what Kurt said, is like when you think about advantages of at least the Ember co-ownership model, is also just the technology stack. I mean, the idea that you get the owners together and try to get them to predict a year out and draft weeks or commit to a fixed week is pretty silly. People have flexible lifestyles. They want to be able to pop the app open, and as easy it is to book an Airbnb. Click date, it's available. Let's go. I'll pay the cleaning fee and you're off and running. That's as simple as we want to make it. And so for our buyers, if you buy a 1/8 share, you get, 6 days can be booked at any one time and 45 days in a year. And you make sure you get one of the 8 kind of big holidays in kind of any given year. But it really is flexible, and the calendar goes out 2 years at any given time.
I was about to say that you said you could go as long as 2 years, which is amazing.
Yeah. So at any given time, that calendar is about 50% free.
Right.
And so there's lots of kind of gaps in there for people to really utilize the asset. And so, you may see other attempts at co-ownership and maybe small groups and little geos, and all they're really doing is selling an asset 8 times, and then you're on your own. There's no tech stack. They're not going to manage it for you. They're just kind of aggregating the group. And our thesis has always been, we're not really a real estate company. We're an experience company. And from your first, maybe experience with kind of one of our salespeople all the way down through purchase and your first stay all the way down to generations in the house of upgrade, downgrade, or sell, it's tech enabled and seamless that entire time. And that's why in most cases we've made a pretty incredible investment to have all of the people that represent those functions be our own internal employees who are committed to delivering that experience from top to tail, as they say.
Pretty interesting stuff here. And let's see here. I guess, one of the questions is, and we talked about this yesterday, because again, if someone reads the press release really quick, they might think, well, this is just a timeshare deal. And it's not a timeshare deal. It's different from timesharing. It's different from Airbnb in many, many specific ways. I mean, I shared with you, both of you the other day, my experience with a Disney timeshare that my family bought years ago. And it was an adventure. I'm being very kind to the Walt Disney Company about having to sell that timeshare, but very few people. We certainly didn't, read the agreement in such tremendous detail, because we probably would have looked at the timeshare deal back then with a bit more skepticism. But how does it, Kurt? How does it differ from time sharing and sometimes some of the traps that people run into with a time sharing type of arrangement? How would you distinguish it?
Yeah. So Ember is not a timeshare, like you said, no. And like you, we're not fans of timeshare model either. I mean, most of us who've seen the model and the high pressure sales tactics, and it's just not attractive. And so there's some very important distinctions, and I'll kind of go through some of those. On the first hand, with a timeshare, you're buying the right to use the property. And so with Ember, you're not buying the right to use the property. You're buying the property. Like, it's an actual ownership interest in the real estate. And that's a major distinguishing factor, because as we talked about earlier, as the values of that property goes up alongside the rest of the market, the owner gets to capture that upside. When we sell the home and bring in our owner groups, Ember does not retain any interest in that property, 0 interest. It is that owner group's home, and they own 100% of it. And so they hire us at that point to basically help manage it and provide the tech layer. And but that's one, probably fundamental difference. Another big difference, and we talked about this, is the scheduling. With a timeshare, typically you have 52 or more owners in that timeshare. With Ember, it's 2 to 8. And that's a really important distinction, because when you have 52 members in a timeshare, you are going to get a specific week. And, and that week is not flexible. So it's like, if you want to, swap that week, you have to find somebody to take it. Or you might see listings for them for sale to buy the week out. That's not the Ember model either. So we provide the app. It's on demand. You can come down for 2 nights this weekend if the home's available with just you and your spouse, or you can schedule a week, a year and a half in advance for the full family reunion. And then, there's a certainly like the quality component. I think, most people have stayed at a timeshare at some point. And Ember is a high-end home. It's a high-end home with high-end furniture and often amenities that would come with the resort. So if you're in a warm area, you're going to have a pool, and you're going to have a workstation, as we talked about, places to work from. And so that high-end home and the high-end kind of nature of the house is another distinguishing factor between Ember and the timeshare model.
And Jeff, what's interesting to me as well, again, we chatted about this the other day, is that I think there's a behavioral thing about people who do the time sharing thing or the Airbnb, in terms of, people will be in an Airbnb and they won't be as quite as polite with furniture, and I'm not saying that all Airbnb customers are, college party people, but I just think there's a mentality difference. And when people, if they have a 1/8 stake in a property, that you're probably going to get much more constructive behavior by the person who's done the financing. So would you validate that you think that, generally speaking, probably in addition to the things that Kurt said, I think it's just a different mentality of someone who's going to jump into this, just from where they're coming from.
Well, there's the old phrase, like, drive it like a rental. This is the antithesis of that, and so they own it like an owner. And it's actually kind of surprised us. I mean, we've already, like, there are 5 or 6 dozen families that are already in our have purchased ownership shares and staying in the home, and we're getting a pretty active feedback loop, and actually pretty blown away by the feedback to date. And sometimes they'll call us and they'll say, "Hey, this thing got out of line, but I just fixed it, and so if it pops up again, let me know." And we're like, "Well, wait a minute, we have a concierge service. You just open up your app and chat with our agent, and we'll be out there in a second." And it's like, "No, I just want to fix it." And that kind of blew us away, the sort of pride of ownership that goes in to that kind of thinking, because they own it. They're expecting to come back multiple times, and they're expecting to at some point be able to turn around and sell it, and they want to preserve and both grow the value of the asset as well. So it's definitely a different mentality, and it's also different in the way they invest in their communities. If they're only stopping there one time, then okay, why bother to meet the neighbors? I'm never going to see these people again. Let's party till all night, and if the cops show up, great. That's not how they think. It's the opposite. It's let's get to know them. We're going to be down here 5 or 6 times a year, and if they need us to bring in their garbage cans on a Monday morning, we'll do it. If we need to borrow some eggs, let's get to know each other. And so you get much more of an investment into these local communities that they're in, which is totally different than kind of the renter mentality. So it's been actually surprising and fun to see. I think the best of humanity come out in these moments, especially while we've all been cooped up in COVID for so long.
I think that's going to be interesting for you guys to track over time, because I do think this is going to have a very beneficial impact as this model rolls out in different communities. And I think, a rising tide, affects all boats. And I think it'll be it'll be a big plus for the communities that this shows up in. The last thing I want to chat on is, what markets are Ember focusing on? Obviously, people can go on your website, and I wish, by the way, you'd had the Jersey Shore. I would have been all over that, 25 years ago, I guess. But Kurt, let me go with you for your first answer. What markets you currently focus on, and then I'll let Jeff kind of talk about what markets you're ultimately expanding into.
Yeah, so we're in St. George, Utah, Park City, Utah, Bend, Oregon, and a couple other locations that we're starting to move into. All these homes are on our site. You can go to emberhome.com and see the markets we're in and the homes. And I'll let Jeff kind of speak to the expansion, which is part of the, purpose of this financing. It's an exciting element of the next stage of the business.
How much inventory do you have, and how many units are on that website right now, number wise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at it now. In between, homes that are shares that we actively own and are selling, as well as we have on our website what we call potential buys, where we work with an agent in a market and say, wow, this is a really interesting house. We may not actually own it at that moment, and work with the agents that if we get enough phone calls on it and the first 2 or 3 people sign up and say, oh, we'd love to own that place, that we'll just buy it and then aggregate the rest of the buying group. So there's close to 20 up there between owned and potential buys all across places like Bend, Oregon, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and all the way down to places like Galveston, Texas, Palm Springs. And as far as where we're going, I mean, anywhere where Americans are going to vacation, you're going to see us. Certainly the coasts on both sides, but there's also kind of fun little pockets there where outside of kind of major designated kind of market areas, you may get these kind of favorite little vacation spots like the Wisconsin Dells or Leavenworth, Washington, or the San Juan Islands, kind of places like that are really fun, and maybe not the first thing that you would think of, but they all have these awesome little kind of cottage communities with cabins and the types of places where you'd want to go 5 or 6 times a year and kind of build your family memories there. So many more coming, and one of the things why we're excited about this financing is that it allows us to accelerate not just going into markets and having owned real estate that we're able to unbundle and sell to co-owners, but we create infrastructure in the markets that we go into. There are employees, W-2 employees in market, dedicated home concierge that are in those markets, dedicated sales and real estate folks that are in those markets. And so, we don't just kind of show up and you got a problem and call the home office. We want local people there to kind of work with you. And so I think we're measured about the markets that we go to, because where we go into, we want to make sure that we have great people in full-time roles locally there. And so you'll continue to see more of that. We don't want to dilute the quality of the experience by racing out to a gajillion markets, but not having someone there and time zone problems and blah, blah, blah. So we're excited about where we are.
Delivered, organized fashion. I agree with that. We've got about a minute left. Kurt, any closing comments?
Yeah, Mark. So first, thanks for having us on. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to talk through the Ember model, and we're just excited. We're excited about Ember. We're excited about the value that we're bringing to our customers. It's so fun as entrepreneurs and tech founders to see these families walk into these homes and just that emotional moment when you've bought into something and it's delivered and it's better than expected. And they get to share that moment with friends and family. That's what the Ember experience is all about. It's about bringing people together to create lasting memories. And for us, it's about making that experience as seamless as possible. With this new financing led by Peter Thiel, who's an iconic investor and entrepreneur, we are going to be expanding all across the country. And we're thrilled to see the Ember brand, expand beyond where it is today and onto the, coasts of both sides of the country, and then internationally as the Ember model continues to grow.
Well, Kurt, thanks very much for that. I wish you guys a lot of good luck. I think this is going to be totally disruptive in the marketplace, and I suspect you're going to have a lot of inventory on that site over the next several months. But you're doing it in a very organized and structured way, and I think that's the right approach, because you want to have people to have a remarkable experience right from the get-go. But Kurt, Jeff, thanks again for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the SmartTechCheck podcast part of your day or commute. And please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at MarkVinaTechGuy. Until next time, have a great weekend.